Galactic greetings, humans, aliens, cyborgs, and I guess robots. This is the 2000 AD Thrillcast, and on this episode, we are giving you the ultimate guide to getting into the galaxy's greatest comic. Borag Thung Earthlets, it is I, Molch-R, Tharg's publicity droid, here with another episode of the 2000 AD Thrillcast, and I am joined by our often contributor to the podcast, Chloe Maville, all the way on the other side of the globe. Welcome back, Chloe. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, Mike.
Good.
I'm happy to be back. Always happy to be back.
And I've seen the size of the can of Red Bull that you're sipping from during the course of it. So there we go. Yeah.
We are out here bringing the energy. If you can't make your own, store-bought is fine.
Wonderful. Well, so 2000 AD has just had a jumping on issue, Prog 2401, where a whole bunch of stories start. It's an ideal, we do these a couple of times a year. It's ideal time to get into reading 2000 AD if you are not already doing so. So I thought this would be an awesome opportunity to explain how to get into 2000 AD via the medium of some of our collections. Because I mean, I don't know how it is for you. We often hear at shows and upon the internet. I hear a lot about 2000 AD. I'd love to get into 2000 AD. There's a lot of it. I mean, there's almost 48 years of it. Where the hell do I start? And so, yeah, this episode, along with the deep dive that we're adding to the end, is going to be just a quick fire half-hour guide to what we think are good collections to begin with. I mean,
I was born for this, Mike.
you know what? I was just about to say, can you recall your first interaction with 2000 AD?
My first interaction with 2000 AD. My first interaction with 2000 AD.
Like, what's your earliest memory of a Dredd or a Prog or?
I can't remember exact specifics because I got into 2000 AD because I had a very eccentric uncle who that's the introduction to 2000 AD, find an eccentric uncle. But he collected tons of comics, tons of British comics, Euro comics. He's the one that got me into all the music that I'm still into, movies, things like that. And he had a whole collection of 2000 AD progs inexplicably just hanging around his house. And he was like, "Here, you're a feral little goblin, read this." And it was kind of over from there. Like I can't remember specifics because I was relatively young.
Yeah.
I was pretty young. But I do have very clear memory of going back when I was a teenager and being like, "Oh, I remember these comics.
Mm.
Like I do remember these." And then seeking out Strontium Dog. Cause and which is still absolutely my mode of operation today. It's like when in doubt, I always go back to Strontium Dog. But I mean the beauty of 2000 AD is well, let's start on the other end. I understand fully why so many people have a hard time just going like, I really want to get into these comics, but oh my God, there's what, 47 years of
Yeah,
history?
almost 48. It'll be 48 in
Almost
February.
48.
Yeah.
So there's almost 48 years of this history, and it is a weekly comic and it's
Mm.
never stopped. So there's so much to dive into, and it can seem really daunting
Mm.
to figure out where that is. Similar to manga in that way, like long running things like One Piece and things. You're like, I would love to start this. Also, where? Um, but with 2000 AD, there are these beautiful little jumping on points that get built in where it's like let's make it nice and easy for
Mm.
people to be able to grasp what we're about. And there are so many graphic novels. There are many collections of these stories, which is the preferred method that I think a lot of people read. Um, and there's key books at least that stick out to me where it's like, you want to get into 2000 AD, here's the best of the best. And of course, that's what Best of 2000 AD is about, as well as these little like nicely packaged, yes, put them on display.
There we go.
Yes. And they're just a little taste of not just the sheer breadth of what there is published, both in the past and present, but it's a consistently good little package of quality.
Mm.
There is never a bad story in the bunch, especially in the best of series.
Yeah.
It really is the best of the best. And I'm not just saying that because I got to write an essay in one of them.
Well, there is that. There is that. Very good it is too. Well, I mean, we'll start off with recommending Best of 2000 AD, which is the six volume series that came out in 22, no, 23. And I mean, my colleague Owen, absolutely the driving force behind this, was very much, I'm going to hone this down to something that's just absolutely spot on. So you get a complete Dredd tale. In the first volume, you get the beginning of Brink, which we will talk about more, I'm sure, in a moment. You get the beginning of Halo Jones. You get a Strontium Dog story. You get a Judge Anderson story. And then the Aaron Quinch, which again, we'll talk about more.
Yay!
And for those of you watching on YouTube, you'll just be able to see Quinch's jaw poking up over there. Oh, and there's DR as well. There you go on Chloe's sleeve. Which what a perfect person to talk about jumping into 2008 on the basis that you are a walking advertising
The
board for our product.
advertisement. We've
Yeah,
got everybody, and then we've got Dredd down here.
nice.
Uh,
Luckily, nobody wants to see my pudgy white flesh, so I don't adorn it with anything. Um, unless you follow me on Instagram, and I'm really sorry about that. But yes, so Best of 2000 AD, 6 volumes. These are available both online and they're very washed out on my camera for some reason. Available from your comic book store and also our web shop. Really great. One of the things I absolutely adore about these is the quality of the covers,
oh,
because you've got like
absolutely.
Ian McHugh drawing Judge Dredd. I can't remember the name of this
I mean,
artist.
the quality throughout in general, like the covers are incredible, and the newly commissioned covers are incredible, but the print quality on the inside,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, it's perfect.
it's
It's
just great.
just
So that one's by Evan Kagel. And there's other versions which are web shop exclusive, 2000 AD. We've got Marguerite Sauvage, Erica Henderson, Becky Cloonan, and Jamie McKelvey, and of course designed by the great Tom Muller. So really, if you're looking to get into 2000 AD and you just don't know where to start, you need something easily available from your local comic book store. You can't really do better than Best of 2000 AD.
yeah, you can,
Hence the name. So
that's what it is on the tin.
yeah. We've got the obvious one out of the way. Hit me with your first recommendation.
Hit you with my first recommendation. Okay, I've made notes about this because when you messaged me to come on here, I was like panicked. Every time I'm ever asked to do like, what are your favorite 2000 AD
Yeah.
recommendations? I'm elated, and I also just fly into a state of like, there's too much, and I can't just list off like 50 books because that
Yeah.
is so overwhelming. Um, so one of the more recent series that, well, I say recent, but within the past couple of years, one of the more contemporary series that has completely grabbed hold of me has been Brink. And I know we said we were going to bring it up, but like,
Wait,
So Brink is Dan Abnett, who I have such an affinity for his writing. It's just remarkable. He's clearly a writer that has fun writing his stories, and I
Mm,
appreciate
mm.
that as a reader. And of course, it's INJ Culberd doing the artwork. There's who I don't even know how to properly describe Culbert's like style. There are so many little nuanced things that he does. There are folds in fabric that have broken my brain when I'm trying to look at it. I'm like, how did you actually accomplish that? That's really remarkable, that level of
I
detail.
always I think of him as Blade Runner Hergé.
That's a really good descriptor.
Thank you. Um, because it's as you said, it's all these tiny little touches. He's got a clear line style in that, you know, it's all there. There's no sketchiness, there's no kind of
Yeah.
breaking of lines. But what he does with them is intimate scale and texture,
Yes,
particularly with
very
his
much
colors
so.
as well. That
Mhm.
just and what this conversation has made me realize is that I've lent someone my volume one and they have not returned it. Um,
Oh, I wish I would have known. I would have brought mine over.
but yeah, so that's the two, three, and four of Brink.
I mean,
And then,
even the covers, I'm just like, if I didn't know when I was walking through a comic shop, like that is a book that I would at least pick up and want to look at.
yeah,
They're just very,
absolutely.
they focus the eye.
Yeah. Well, what is it about about Brink that makes this a good point for someone to jump on?
Well, it's funny that you say that I&J Culbert is the Blade Runner Hergé, because I actually think of Dan Abnett as and I mean this in a good way, okay? I have to preface this. Dan Abnett is the M. Night Shyamalan of comics. Because, and I mean that in the positive way,
Okay,
because
all right. You're gonna have
there's
to unpack that.
I will unpack that. There is always going to be a twist, going into it, that Dan is weaving a little web. He's just sitting there typing away, and that you are in it for the long haul.
Mm,
There's always another layer, there's always another twist. But you're so entertained, and that you don't realize that you're being hoodwinked into believing where that twist or layer is going to be.
mm,
Um, the payoff ends up being such a slow burn, which is the rewarding part, and then it just explodes into all of the stories, and bring explode into this like domino effect of paranoia and mystery and politics in a way that is like those three things can sometimes be a little bit heady or a little bit dry, and you are just entertained the whole time.
mm, mm.
It's the perfect like paranoia thriller space story.
Yeah, and it's that slow burn element. Like, you know, I've seen some people go, "Oh, it's too slow," but actually, no. Particularly if you're reading it in collection, it's
Yeah,
just he gets there's such a focus on dialogue and character in a way that the very few 2000 AD series it's almost like not like a kind of anti 2000 AD series that you
a
expect to be
little
full of
bit.
action,
Yeah.
you know. So yeah, it was perfect. I mean, on top of that, I would also recommend The Out,
Yay.
which is Dan's work with Mark Harrison, which is I've seen people draw comparisons to Halo Jones, which is the
Yeah,
first
I
comic,
can
which
see
is in
that
Best of
for
2000
sure.
AD, and I think that's a little unfair because
Right.
The Out is for me something quite unique and interesting in that it is a journey of self-discovery.
Mhm.
End of description. You know, not normally there's something else. It's basically a a photojournalist who's just backpacking around the universe and then finds herself utterly on her own and must survive on her own wits while undergoing this profound realignment of her world and personal view, you know?
You make it sound so much more eloquent. I have in my notes just under are you ready? Under description for
Yeah.
the out. All I wrote down was Prog Rock Hunter S. Thompson in space.
I mean that's succinct, and it's important to be succinct. No, absolutely, absolutely. And it's you. There's very few artists. It's kind of weird. 2080's got this thing where we have these incredible artists who never cross this. It doesn't matter how good they are, they never cross over into American comics, almost because
Which
I
is
think
criminal.
well, they're too unique. They're,
Ooh, ooh, drive the knife in,
yeah.
Mike.
But Arthur Ranson, Mark,
Oh,
Mark Harrison, Henry Flint, you know,
yes.
absolute titans, but not what you know a North American, a superhero audience considers to be the kind of thing they want to read, which is, to our benefit because they stick around and work for us. Um,
Word.
but
It's
it, yeah,
it seems so silly too because these are people who, granted, I'm a little selfish and I'm like, well, I'm kind of glad that you didn't make it over to the American market in the superhero thing because yeah, it would make superhero comics better and frankly more interesting to people like me.
mm,
But there would be I feel like that would suck some of the life out of it. I don't know, that sounds really horrible, but like sorry Marvel and DC. The but it's it I'm just glad that they are where they are and that they're able to have the room and work with a company like 2000 AD that does seem to give people room to explore
mm,
their like the in these stories in this medium and make something that is completely different even from other sci-fi horror fantasy comics that are existing anywhere else.
mm.
So yeah, keep them on that side of the pond. We don't want them here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You're well. So, what's your next recommendation?
Well, you brought up Arthur Ranson,
Mm,
and for my money, and this story is also in 2000, best of 2000 AD, which is Judge Anderson's side division, Shambhala, which was, of course, the late great Alan Grant, and Arthur Ranson doing the artwork. And there's such a marriage between supernatural in a deeper dive of like what the psi division actually is,
mm,
and also the moral implications of having a psi division, which is a great thing to dig into, and of Judge Anderson. Um, but there's also like the supernatural element of Shambhala itself, and there's a rich looking into of the justice system, which is not necessarily a new thing for things that are Judge Dredd adjacent, but
mm,
this is done in such a big way. This is easily some of Grant's stronger work with Anderson,
mm,
and which is saying something, frankly. But more than anything else, like Arthur Ranson's work in this, Arthur Ranson's artwork is it's so lush.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
just absolutely decadent. Um, and every single panel, every single page is just a feast for the
Mhm,
eyes.
mm. No, absolutely. I mean, for our YouTube viewers, going to hold up some of these pages, and we'll have them
I
on the
mean, the
video.
layout, it's just spectacular.
And I interviewed Arthur at length a few years ago for this podcast, and he just the humility of the man to just go, yeah, well, I thought it looked nice.
Yeah.
All right,
Oh,
um,
you
but
just
yeah.
thought it looked nice, did you, Arthur? Good for you.
But so Shambhala is available in the Essential Judge Anderson collections, which again the essentials. We'll talk about the Dread essentials as well, and there's also the Rogue Trooper essentials now, which are the again tailor-made for people to get into it. There's also following on from the Arthur Ransom thing, the Satan collection,
Yes,
which
very much.
again just absolutely stunning. I mean, this is a guy who had such a long career in comics. It's certainly one of my, I've got his artwork on my wall. That's how much I absolutely adore his work. And Satan is one of those stories where literally a giant um, bone white creature, half a mile high, walks up to the walls of Mega City One and insists that he is the bright morning star, the cast out of heaven Lucifer himself. And so there's something Miltonian about a Judge Dredd comic. Just
Surely that can't surprise you.
well, no. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love it. But it's just that's one of the things that is so great about the Judge Dredd and Judge Anderson stuff is how adaptable it is. So you can tell ghost stories, you can tell, war stories. You can do all sorts of things. We'll come on to Dredd in a little bit, but that's a really good pick.
We
My
gotta build up.
you what?
We gotta build up. We're just building steam.
Well, absolutely, absolutely. So my next pick is Nemesis the Warlock.
That was gonna be
There we
mine
go. So this is volume one of the definitive edition of Nemesis the Warlock. This is the paperback. Um, if you have the chance to get hold of the hardcover that is available from our web shop, but also I believe from comic book stores as well. If you're on YouTube, then you are watching me flash the gold inlaid cover of this hardback edition designed by our very own Gemma Sheldrake, and it's absolutely there's going to be 5 volumes of this, and they're absolutely stunning. And then, as Chloe is demonstrating, you get Kev O'Neill, the late great Kev O'Neill,
oh,
uh, one of comics' all-time greats, and I'm not expecting any
absolutely.
pushback on that.
No, none. And I don't like anybody who does give you pushback on that is the reason we should bring back bullying because like Kev O'Neill is one of these people who is for my money criminally unsung by so many audiences and Nemesis in particular like this don't get me wrong, this is some of Pat Mills's best work in to me and but this book is about Kev O'Neill. The like all the Nemesis series in general for me is it's Kev O'Neill
Hmm.
every single time. That's what really, really, really makes it. And it's I mean, it's sword and sorcery at its finest. That's kind of very
I mean, and sci-fi and visceral hatred of the Catholic Church and some of the most grotesque, beautifully grotesque bits of artwork you'll ever see. I mean, it's the old thing. Kevin O'Neill is the only person, the only artist who the Comics Code Authority objected to, not for something specific that he did, but his whole art style. They literally referred to it as objectionable.
that's a badge. Like,
It's a hell of a thing, hell of a thing. And when his work with Pat Mills, with Alan Moore, this is kind of like epoch making work. If you consider that the one Green Lantern story that he did, well, not the only one, but the Green Lantern story he did with Alan Moore was the entire basis for like an epic DC Comics event a number of years ago. Like that's how much visual invention there was in that, a lot alongside the great Alan Moore.
yeah.
Um, what an achievement! What an absolute achievement! And Nemesis is it's morally complex. It's incredibly imaginative. He doesn't technically turn up um, until what 30 odd pages in.
Yeah, it's actually way farther than you'd expect.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And so yeah, that is a huge. And the volume one's also got Jesus Redondo, who has talking about criminally underappreciated artists at
Oh,
2000
get it.
AD, and a lovely guy to boot. So that's
Us just being selfish. That's
yeah.
great.
So what's your next?
My next one is actually a more recent Rogue Trooper.
Right.
Um, Because I have a deep, deep soft spot for one of comics' favorite Irishmen, Garth Ennis,
Northern
and
Irishman.
Northern Irishman. And like I was so glad to see Garth writing this book because I feel like Rogue Trooper, if you go back and read like throughout the history of Rogue Trooper, it's a series that very much requires a writer that understands what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And uh with so many uh interesting political kind of heavy war stories in Garth's oeuvre, like what better way to display that than Rogue Trooper, which Rogue Trooper Blighty Valley is, I think I have it over here actually. Yes. And it's just spectacular because Garth writes it as a war story. It is Rogue. It's a time travel story which is fun in and of itself, but it's him coming in contact with what is it, British World War One soldiers, isn't that
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And and frankly, I can't think of a contemporary writer um, who could handle that concept better than Garth Ennis.
Well, I mean, we've kind of we'll talk about battle action in a moment, hopefully, but we've become one of the publishers of Garth's war stories, and fortunately allowing him to play around with all the things that influenced him when he was a kid, and you're entirely right. Rogue is also one of those series which, and this is going to sound like an odd thing when you consider like it's a future war story. He's one of those characters that you can do an awful lot of different things with.
Yes.
So, you go back and there's the Tales of New Earth collections, which are the sequential collections, which are being retooled as the Rogue Trooper Complete Collection in 2025. Um, there's a real variety that Jerry Finley Day, the variety of stories that Jerry Finley Day did with Rogue Trooper, of course, co-created by Dave Gibbons, the artist on Watchmen, along with many other things. The Essential Rogue Trooper
Yeah.
is a pretty good place to start if you want color comics, because obviously a lot of 2000 AD early stuff is black and white. If you want it in color, then the Essential Rogue Trooper Genetic Infantryman is a good place to start. The next volume in that is the Traitor General, which is the central premise of Rogue Trooper. But yeah, and there's a new series that's just begun in 2000 AD, which is When a GI Dies, which is Garth Ennis and Patrick Goddard, the team on Blighty Valley, which very much looking forward to working our way through. Um, I'm just conscious of the time. You know what? Let's talk about battle action for a moment. So this is Battle Action Volume 2. For those of you who don't know your British comics history, Battle and Action were the predecessors of 2000 AD. Battle was all pretty much World War II stuff, with a couple of exceptions, and was pretty revolutionary for its time. A lot, very gritty, very kind of in your face. And then Action came along, and was so violent and nasty and over the top that eventually it got pulled from shelves, pulped, and then 2 months later returned as like a neutered version of itself, and eventually Battle and Action merged with one another. But this is Garth Ennis and a whole host of other creators playing around with some of the brilliant Battle and Action characters. So you've got Major Easy, you've got Kids Rule OK, you've got
Hey.
Dredger. Um,
I have a
you
soft spot for Kids Rule OK. Like,
it's great, and what's wonderful is that Garth is bringing on creators who you would never think would be into battle action ever. So in the most recent series this year, you got Brian K. Vaughan of Saga and Why the Last Man fame writing Kids Rule.
And it was so good.
But yeah,
It's one
it's one because you've also got John Wagner, like one of the brains behind Battle. Never mind 2000 AD returning to HMS Nightshade, which is just so good to see. But there's two volumes of Battle Action, which are available for comic book stores, and the third series is currently running in monthly periodicals, which is very good, and will also be collected later down the road. I'm conscious of the time. We said half an hour. Uh, Give me your next recommendation.
Okay, I'm gonna switch gears on us and I'm
Hmm.
gonna go into Dread
Okay.
because
All right.
because
All right.
we got to get there eventually. We got to give the people what they want, Mike. And so my okay, so gather my thoughts. So my recommendations for Dread are kind of threefold,
Right.
especially if you're trying to get someone to read Dread that is running right now. Um, because as a certain somebody has talked about in his book, I Am the Law, Mr. Michael Molch-R, Dredd is not even necessarily about predicting the future of the justice system and policing. It's more about the fact that that system has somehow never really changed.
Mm.
And so the beauty of Dredd is looking up these series and these collections. I always recommend Case Files #5 for the Apocalypse War in particular, which is so much about like the idea of yes, the belief in destruction for the greater good, and that idea being framed through a heroic lens.
Mm.
Um, that alone is such a core tenet of how Dredd is still operating now
Mm.
to an extent in a very new and different sort of way. But I'm not going to give any spoilers. And especially Apocalypse War, because I also tend to recommend kind of a three book lineup, which is Titan, The Small House, and Trifecta. I will
Right.
also knock everything over trying to get all of these books out. Um, so all three of these are so beautifully paired together, and it is Rob Williams. There's also Al Ewing and Cy Spurrier on Trifecta as well, and it's the weaving of a web that is ultimately so much of the payoff of Apocalypse War, which was what 37 years earlier,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
Um, and it goes to show that going back and reading these particular stories can influence, especially in the case of Judge Dredd, can influence what you're reading right now in such a spectacular way that it's just really rewarding as a reader to take the time to learn that old part of Dredd's history, because you get things like this which lead into what's exactly happening right now. So how does Dredd decide to blow up East City 1, and like how does for the greater good, and he's the good guy, the hero. Like how does that influence the idea that people begin to figure out, even people on the inside begin to figure out that the judges are fascistic? And how does that influence when we see concepts like defunding the police come up? And how does that all play in? So yeah, Titan, Small House, and Trifecta. I'm counting that as one recommendation
Okay.
because
All right. Well, I mean, the pile of books I've got here, it kind of, yeah, we need that exception.
you have
If
to learn how to cheat.
Oh yeah, oh very much so. Well, I mean, ultimately, as you say, there are multiple different ways into Judge Dredd. There is the case files, which is the Law in Order, which is the sequential reprinting of Judge Dredd stories. I mean, 4 and 5, volumes 4 and 5. generally where I recommend, if you've never read any Judge Dredd, 4 and 5, you get obviously the Apocalypse War, you get the Dark Judges. I think the Graveyard Shift is in 4 as well, I think.
I,
Um,
yeah, I think you're right.
yeah, pretty sure it is. Where you're not just seeing big epics and like weird supernatural stuff, but you're seeing the day-to-day reality of life for Dredd. If you're looking for something a bit more accessible, there is the Essential Judge Dredd collections, which began with Judge Dredd America. Which, if you've heard about the kind, there we go. There's the old edition. If you've heard about the kind of thread of stories about democracy through Judge Dredd, then that's definitely one to get. There's Necropolis, which is still one of my all-time
Absolutely.
favorite Judge Dredd stories. Beautiful, beautiful Carlos Escala artwork. And that continues on into collections like Origins, Judgment Day, things like that. It's a great way to get the greatest hits of Judge Dredd. And we do have a video on our YouTube channel with recommendations for Judge Dredd collections. Should you need further ideas of what to go for, I'm going to round this out with a bit of horror because it's almost Halloween.
Yay. This
Thistlebone
one.
by Tom Eglinton and Simon Davis. Now, talking about criminally underrated artists who
No,
wouldn't
seriously.
necessarily work in the States, Simon Davis is a portrait painter.
Mhm.
That's his job. He also works in comics.
Who happens to work in
Oh,
comics?
happens to work in comics. And Thistlebone is basically kind of folk horror in the vein of the kind of the folk horror revival of the last sort of 10 years or so, the oeuvre of Ben Wheatley, people like that, all the way back to the folk horror of The Wicker Man, and just again, for the people on YouTube, the pages, fully painted pages.
Oh,
Um,
it's pure, it's actual full-on folk horror,
yeah, yeah.
which is, I mean, which I feel is something that you get less of in comics. I
Mm.
feel like that's something that's relatively hard to accomplish. Um, I've been talking about how it's difficult to do body horror properly in comics as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
I feel like folk horror is very similar to that in that it's more about a feeling, and so much of the artwork in Thistlebone is what actually evokes that feeling that you get
Mm.
from like watching a folk horror movie.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's with folk horror, it's all about the uncanny, the things that you recognize, but presented in a way that makes them uncertain and frightening. And Simon's so good at that, and Tom's script is fantastic. So there's a couple of volumes of that. And I mean, we know we've known each other long enough to know that we could sit here for another couple of hours and just go
Absolutely.
through and essentially just recommend everything.
Yeah, pretty much.
Therefore,
Enthusiastic about it all. It's
oh
all
yeah,
good.
absolutely. But utterly negating the idea of here's an easy guide for what to what to get into. So thank you so much for that. If anyone has any questions, they should comment on our Twitter at 2000 AD. We're on Blue Sky. We're on Facebook. And we're on YouTube. So please do let us know your recommendations for where to start reading with 2000 AD and what you think of our recommendations. And thank you so much to Chloe Maville for chatting away and just opening the door ever so slightly on the blazing kind of antimatter engine of 2000 AD.
That seems like the right way to put it. Yes.
Yeah,
Antimatter engine.
I like how eloquent we've both been.
I know.
And
We
yeah.
managed to pull through. We did it.
Wonderful. And for those who don't get 2000 AD regularly, like I said, Prog 2401 is a jumping on issue. the 2400 and the Judge Dredd magazine, 47, I want to say 5, are a big crossover event. So if that's your bag, then go and grab those. But if you want to jump on 2000 AD, subscribe at 2000ad.com. Or place an order with your local comic book store, or if you're in the UK, a good old-fashioned newsagents. That's how we roll at 2000
Because
AD.
y'all are just lucky enough to have that. Okay.
I mean, the newsstand is hanging on by its fingernails, but it still exists. You know, Smith's is still a thing.
Yeah, it's still happening. Lucky. Come on.
Wonderful. Well, like I said, thank you so much, Chloe. It's
Yeah,
been,
thank you,
as
Mike.
always, an absolute pleasure. Thank you.